Good evening and welcome to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen Artisan Lecture Series. My name is Victoria Dangle and I'm the Executive Director of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen. Our program is supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, as well as the generous support of the Friends of the Artisan Lecture Series. For those of you less familiar with the Society was founded in 1785 by the skilled craftsmen of New York City, artisans who represented 22 different trades, including carpenters, saddlers, tailors, and silversmiths, among others. Today, our 230-year-old organization continues to serve the people of the City of New York through its educational and cultural programs, including our tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the General Society Library, and our nearly 2-century-old lecture series, of which the Artisan Lecture Series is a part. The space you are in tonight is the library of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen. Founded in 1820, it is the second oldest library in New York City and one of the city's 3 remaining membership circulating libraries. And so tonight we gather once more to pay tribute to the art of craftsmanship. The Artisan Lecture Series has dedicated itself to giving voice to internationally known artisans who will talk about the intricacies of their specialized crafts. The mission of the Artisan Lecture Series is to promote the work and art of skilled craftsmen, to assist in ensuring that their unique knowledge is understood and carried forth for future generations. I would now like to introduce you to Karen Taylor, our program director, who will introduce our speaker for the evening. Thank you.
Good evening. Following up on Victoria's remarks, welcome to the General Society. As he's normally resident in Australia, it is such a pleasure to have our speaker here this evening. This is a very rare appearance in North America, and we are delighted that Robert Baines is able to be part of the Artisan Lecture Series. We are very fortunate that an exhibit of his work at Gallery Loupe, Montclair and Heller Gallery, Manhattan, brought him here, and a note that the work at the Gallery Loupe is still will be on for another 2 weeks, so you may want to go and visit that. Plus the fact that there will be some of his work will be on exhibit tonight from that from the gallery exhibit, so that will be displayed after the lecture. I also want to thank Marie Manuels from Metropolitan Museum for suggesting Robert this evening, so thank you very much for that. Robert Baines is both a jeweler and scholar and is considered to be one of the most preeminent contemporary goldsmiths in the world. During his lecture tonight, he will elaborate on some of the techniques he uses and his work process, and also will describe his pathway from orthodox gold and silversmithing to becoming an artist goldsmith. In Australia, he has been awarded the distinguished accolade of Living Treasure Master of Australian Craft. A goldsmith and emeritus professor at RMIT University, Mr. Baines has maintained a national and international profile with exhibitions, awards, lectures, and publications for more than 40 years. His works are in prestigious public collections in Great Britain, Germany, France, Poland, USA, New Zealand, and Australia. While in the research areas of artist goldsmithing and archaeometallurgy, he has received numerous awards, including a Winston Churchill Study Grant, Senior Fulbright, and 2 Senior Andrew Mellon Conservation Fellowships at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It is now my huge pleasure to introduce Robert Baines to you.
It's a great delight to be here. And I'm so astounded that this organisation was formed 3 years before Europeans settled in Australia. It's intriguing. So, on with my story. But it is a delight to thank you for everyone for coming. And what I would like to start off with, I'd just like to talk about the early period of my work. I am the product of RMIT Gold and Silversmithing, RMIT University, Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. It had a school of art, it still has a school of art, and the gold and silversmithing program gave very good foundational teaching. The rudiments of goldsmithing, silversmithing, engraving and enamelling. It was really 4 subjects, and this was very good education. The rudiments of goldsmithing and jewellery making were very clear and exercised. We had 31 contact hours a week, and you could stay back at night, and it just was a feast for me. And so that's where we're going to start. And I've always been a studio artist. Usually if I've employed somebody, it's been 1 or 2 people, but quite often I'm a solitary figure. And you can see this is pretty much a traditional historical goldsmith workshop. But having left the art school, I was still, I guess my consciousness was embedded in that rudimentary making, not really so interpretive. But by 1980, for 10 years I'd supported myself with making diamond jewellery. I was a diamond jeweller, and I would work, say, 3 days a week as a diamond jeweller, and that would fund my artwork. Now, this is a brooch entering the plenitude, and this identifies a little bit of a departure, but really not a clear departure from that rudimentary orthodox learning practice. It's a little bit of both worlds. It's art, but it's also orthodox diamond jewellery, pave set, and using precious stones and things like that. When you see my later work, I've departed completely from these things. But I think that this identified in 1980 that I'd really started to grasp and have an understanding of technical factors in making a jewellery object. And so I was very interested in granulation, and I had a fortuitous sort of experience. My jewellery teacher, he had never done granulation, but he told me about it. And so it was quite a few years after I had a Churchill Fellowship, and that was my first trip overseas to Europe and to America to look at the public collections of Greek and Etruscan gold, where granulation is so important. And so there's a beginning of inventiveness, because the granulation is not a singular material. Normally, historically, and there's very few exceptions, except what you're looking at, is where the granulation is 2 materials, 2 alloys. And so I was playing with alloys and doing experimentation. But I'm just so conscious that this piece, it's in between a commercial diamond jewellery and the quest for an artist's statement. And you can see here some more examples. And so I'm playing with gold, I'm playing with alloys, and adding silver to make a green gold, or adding copper to make a rose gold. But all the time I'm inventing granulation. Instead of putting it on the surface of a substrate, I'm putting it on the edge. So that was quite I thought, a departure at the time. And so I was also doing commission work for boxes, private work, and gold boxes, and with various complexities and intricacies, which I enjoyed. And this one is now in the Art Gallery of South Australia. Another part of my learning was this orthodox silversmithing. And this was the first tea set. This identifies this sort of really rudimentary silversmithing. And this was my first tea set I made in 1989, and it's sterling silver and with titanium. Now, I did three versions of this, 6-piece tea sets, and that first one is in the National Gallery of Victoria. This second one is in the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney. And so this was a variation, and this was really very labour intensive, I have to say, because all those polished surfaces have to be really as close to whatever you think perfect is, okay? And so then the third tea set in this sort of sheet work was the last. Because, you see, it's so rudimentary, this. There's a whole sequence of things that you have to do in order to build the form and then to refine the surface. And it's so laboured over. And from an artistic expression, the materiality and the process is too important. And whereas the subject, when you make art, you have a concept and you're pursuing a subject. So this was my dilemma. And I just likened this to panel beating. Is that what you call it here? You know, where your car gets damaged and you have to take it and somebody with hammers flattens it out. This was sort of like sheet work, what I call panel beating in Australia. So I wanted to depart from these things. And what even made it worse, I went into hollow construction with titanium and silver. I won't sort of spend much time on this, but this was in 1982. It was a group, Furnishings of the Archaeos. And this toured and went to Europe and around the place. But then, with my pursuit for something else, and granulation, my trip to overseas, first trip, was followed by many to look at ancient Greek and Etruscan gold manufacture. This is first millennium Bronze Age gold technology. Now, this was just an academic pursuit. I have to say, I wasn't making ancient jewellery pieces in some sort of artistic way and selling it. This was some sort of a tangent. And I became so interested in it because it really, that ancient gold work, that manufacture, it sort of sings out the drama of the goldsmith at the fire hearth. And the image on the right is of an Egyptian goldsmith at a charcoal hearth. And this is on a wall painting in Thebes. And there's very little information about all this. This is one clear picture which identifies how the goldsmith, there's a charcoal and it's in a pottery vessel that's probably vented, and he blows the air, the fire blows up, and he has a very large flame, and he has tweezers or long-handled tweezers or tongs, and he's ready to put this gold piece, which he's assembled together, and he instantly puts it in and takes it out. This is it. And then it will be a little bit warped and bent, and you can see the flat stones close by. So, I was doing quite a few trips to New York, to the Metropolitan Museum, and this curator of Greek and Roman, Joan Merton, she said, "Robert, you have to come more than a day or for 2 days." I used to write and make an appointment to see certain pieces. And so she was very instrumental in helping me get a senior Fulbright. So that was my first fellowship, research fellowship. And it was essentially, it was to test Bronze Age theories of manufacture. And so I was given quite a privileged, and it's an astounding sort of offering that I received, and that was that I was able to select from the Greek and Roman department, later Egyptian and ancient Near Eastern, but mainly from the Greek and Roman. I would select the pieces that I wanted to work on, and of course I chose the most complex things. And I selected those, and then we put them in the scanning electron microscope and analysed them and got the alloy. And then I was in this situation where I was allowed to copy them and test the theories of manufacture. Now, I have to stress that this copying, this making, was using the known technology of the era. It's no good testing theories with modern techniques. And so that's why you see the blowpipe, and you can see some examples there. And so I made pieces, and you can see these are some gold Etruscan bauli. Bauli is like it's a handbag shape for the ear, and these are 5th century copies, I have to say. I remind you. And you can see how fine they are because they're on drawings, and that's the thickness of the line. So some of the wire is less than the thickness of the line. In fact, some Etruscan wire is the thickness of a hair. It's intriguing. Okay, so here's some more. And so the museum was interested in this because it really gave more information about their collection, and also it brought new knowledge, a knowledge base, expanded the knowledge base for the authenticating of gold works. And the third part for me was just this sheer pleasure of just getting an intimate insight into Bronze Age gold manufacture. And so I would do drawings of pieces. This is another piece from the Metropolitan Museum. I would do drawings, and I would mark out parts that I wanted to look at in the scanning electron microscope. So the drawings were like maps. Once the piece was put in there, it's very difficult to orienteer and see the places where you want to look at. And so what happened was that the drawing was like a map, and we could maneuver it and find things, and it would identify manufacture. The scanning electron microscope, it's a wonderful thing because you can almost walk through the piece, even though this piece is 10.5 millimeters wide. Now that's how big this guy is. This SEM can virtually travel through the piece, and you can see signage of manufacture. And so this gives us evidence, signage of making, signage of the author. Ancient goldsmiths didn't have stamps and didn't sign their work, but you can see if it's a right-handed goldsmith or a left-handed goldsmith. Actually, if you see a left-handed goldsmith, it's a bit of a worry, I have to say. But that's about as close we get to the individual. Anyway, we press on. We don't get distracted. And so there were some seminars and things that I used to do, and after the end of each term, it was 3 months, 4 months, and we would do a sort of a demonstration and of granulation. And here's some of the pieces that were done over the time, over a period of from 1997 to 2008. Now, some of the research was about you saw the pictures of the blowpipe, but this is a 16th century image of an assayer's fire. So I started to experiment with what sort of fire did they have, because the blowpipe, sure, this is the most immediate heat source, but for larger works, this is not so possible. And so we did some research and experimentation about what sort of fire. And so I had quite a few fires at the Metropolitan Museum. And Joan Merton said to me one day, she said, "Robert, do you really want to be known as the person who burnt down the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York?" But anyway, the fire wardens were very interested in the research. That's all I will say. Okay, so we tried some different fires based on that 16th century image, but we're talking about the first millennium BC. We're talking about 500 BC, these pieces. So we just tried a few things, and venting and drafts, and we put. I bought a terracotta flower pot from a florist in Madison Avenue one time, and we inverted. I cut the top off, and it worked quite well. Except it didn't have, I haven't got that image. I had to put a pipe in there to create a draft. But anyway, so we're just playing with the fire. What sort of a fire? Because I can do the manufacture. There's the engagement with the gold. Now, granulation, you can get easily in art making, you can very easily be put into a box and put over there. You can be categorized and dismissed. It's very easy. So I stopped. You saw that earlier granulation work with the different alloys. I stopped using granulation because I got just landed as dismissed as a technician, and I didn't really like that. But the other thing is, I saw something more wonderful, and that is wirework from the Orientalizing period. This is in Etruscan goldwork. This is the 7th century BC. Oh, sorry. This is the second quarter of the 7th century BC. And you can see wire here. You can see the wire as line. It captures space. It fills space. And yet it's mostly immaterial. So this influenced my new direction. And so in 1994 and 1995, I embarked on a new strategy to make pieces. And I really enjoyed this binary system of matter and space, material and immaterial. And this really is able to conjure up a very interesting philosophical, metaphysical direction for me. It is so representational. And so this open line wire work, it captures space. And so in 1995, well, I started 94, and then I made 3 pieces. And the first one was a table. And it's about this high, in sterling silver. And the second piece was a crown. Now, the table is in a private collection. The crown is in the National Gallery of Victoria. And then there is a trumpet, and the trumpet is in the V&A in London. But it's all made from wire. So this was a sort of a... I didn't see it as a technical gymnastic, but once you understand the fundamentals, it reveals itself. It reveals itself. So the table, shifting my thinking to a new linear binary philosophy of matter and space, of the material and the immaterial. So those 3 pieces were very important. Then, in the year 2000, I did another Mellon Fellowship at the Objects Conservation at the Met, and on the weekends I would go to Philadelphia, and there was the 18th century Rome exhibition, and there was a big centrepiece, and I thought I could make a contemporary centrepiece. And so I had a discussion with a supporter, and then when I went home, I embarked on this centrepiece. And it was 3 parts again, and the candle stand, which you can see, when it has the candles in it, it's over 1 metre high. But it's sterling silver and it's powder-coated red. And so here is me, the golden eye from a local newspaper, but you can see the candle stand before it was coloured in the sterling silver. So, the 19th century Rome Philadelphia Art Museum, aspiring to have the centrepiece. A dramatic presence, a visual presence, and so in 3 sections. I wanted each piece to have its own visual integrity and philosophical concept. So, with my golden eye, I commenced. Here I am, looking through the structure. Across the jewelled sea, past flooding plains, deserts, twisters and mountain ranges, and thinking of Philadelphia. So, we come to our next subject. This is bracelet Java la Grande. This is much later. This is in 2005. Bracelet Java la Grande, the space between Vasco da Gama in 1498 and James Cook in 1770. This is the bracelet. Now, the bracelet Java la Grande is the material evidence that connects Australia with Portugal. So there's the wood from the mahogany ship. You can see some wood there. And there's a cruciform cut. And there is a key, what we call the Geelong keys. I will talk about that shortly. And it's made of 16th century manufacture. So that's something to be enjoyed. So I want to talk about this and the importance of it. And so here's my map of the world. And what I want to explain is, this is the 129th meridian, and Spain and Portugal divided up the world in 1522. So one side is Portuguese, one side is Spanish. Now, I'm going to talk about how Vasco da Gama, he left Lisboa and went to Goa in India. And there's a theory that some Portuguese ships crossed over that meridian into the Spanish side of things and went, we know, Botany Bay. There's the Dieppe maps. On the Dieppe maps, it's listed as, there's a coastline that looks like the east of Australia, this coastline of Australia, and the shipwrecked coast here. And on the Dieppe map, this section where Botany, we know as Botany Bay, is called Costa Herbage. Very suspicious. Okay. So, this is the shipwrecked coast here, Cape Otway. And Geelong. This is very important because the Governor Latrobe at the time, this is in the 19th century, Governor Latrobe was on his way to Geelong. He was an amateur archaeologist, and people said, you must come over here and have a look at this. They took him to this hole that had been dug out, and it was 100 metres from the sea. And they said, look, there's seashells here, and this strata of seashells, we found 2 keys. Now, this was reported in the local newspaper, so it must be true. Okay. And the other thing is about this region, there is, up until the end of the 19th century, there was this wreck called the mahogany ship. There is the belief that it was a Portuguese caravel. So why would that be there? Okay, so let's talk about this some more. So there's the Treaty of Tordesillas. Okay, they shouldn't have been on that. The Portuguese should not have been on that Spanish side. Therefore, there is a shroud of secrecy. And the bracelet, it has all that evidence. It has the key, which we believe is the Geelong key. It has the wood, which could possibly have been from the mahogany ship. It's 16th century manufacture, this bracelet. So, very interesting. Vasco da Gama, in 1498, sailed the first Portuguese ships to India, from which he returned with quantities of spices, woods, and jewels. Did all the ships return, or did some continue further east and return later with even more jewels? Was bracelet Java la Grande one of those jewels? I've just said that. Okay. Vasco da Gama sets sail. He leaves behind his beautiful sister, a giddy maiden, and his brother, who enjoyed dressing up and liked being Santa Claus best of all. Did Portuguese ships continue further east as Indonesia or Australia? Did they reach the sandy beaches of Australia? Did Portuguese sailors play beach games, leaving mahogany shipwrecks, lose the keys in the sand, or even collect a kangaroo or two? Some scholars consider that Gomes de Sequeira in 1525 sailed from Ternate and found northern Australia and New Guinea. Others attribute the first European discovery of Australia to Cristobal Mendonça, who sailed out of Malacca in 1522. There's a policy of secrecy about all of this, as I said. It explains the silences together with the destruction of records in the Lisbon earthquake of 1755. Now, this is a tabernacle. It's a gold tabernacle of filigree, and it's very similar to our bracelet, Java la Grande. It's late 16th century. Does the mid-16th century manufacturer of bracelet Java la Grande identify same authorship? So this is a question. Is it the same author that made this tabernacle and made the Java la Grande? Then there would have to be some sort of adjustment of time there a little bit. There's a little bit of a gap. So, does the mid-16th century manufacturer bracelet Java la Grande identify same authorship as the tabernacle? If this is so, should the tabernacle manufacture be dated earlier? So here's our next one. This is a silver piece, late 16th century. Does the mid-16th century manufacturer of bracelet Java la Grande identify same authorship again? So a very similar manufacture that we see in Java la Grande. So let's look at the evidence of its authenticity. We look at this granulation, this beaded wire work in the SEM, and it's all quite appropriate for the time and accurate. And this is a swage beaded wire, and you can read this would have been understood in 16th century. There was the treatise by Theophilus Presbyter in the 11th century AD. And also Cellini, a little bit of a mention about beaded wire, not very much. But there's a lot from Cellini's treatise about powder solder. And here we have powder solder. Sometimes it makes contact, sometimes it doesn't. But so the SEM really does identify, and here is surface depletion, which further confirms that this is archetypal 16th century manufacture. So where is bracelet Java la Grande? Where is it? Here's some analysis, surface analysis. So it's all appropriate to that period manufacture. Now, where is bracelet Java la Grande? If we look in the main catalogue of the National Antique Museum in Lisboa, this is on the front cover is the portrait of a lady. This is a famous portrait, a 17th century portrait. And what do we find? Java la Grande. Now, the theory is that this portrait, which was so famous, that they must have cleaned it one day and then they found underneath the paint layer and all the carbon and things is bracelet Java la Grande. So this was quite a breakthrough. So maybe it's always existed there. If we look at this adoration of the Magi in 1524, all the others are adoring the Christ child, but this fellow who's not concentrating, we see it, bracelet Java la Grande. Splendour and Fantasy, Queen Maria Anna of Austria in the 18th century, bracelet Java la Grande exists again. Devotion and Vanity, the Christ child, 17th century, bracelet Java la Grande. Now, the Del Robbia workshop. This is one that didn't fall from the wall at the Met. We shouldn't talk about that. Oh, okay. This is a coat of arms, terracotta coat of arms. But what do we see? We see two bracelet Java la Grande. So there is a second one. Did Captain Cook have one of the Dieppe maps? What is the significance of him naming Botany Bay Costa Herbage? Did the Lisbon authorities deliberately conceal the discovery of the east coast by Mendonça? How did the Mendonça voyage involve the lost keys at Geelong and the mahogany shipwreck at Warrnambool connect with bracelet Java la Grande? Does relocating the bracelet Java la Grande with other Indo-Portuguese artefact in the Antique Museum provide the missing link? Does the iconography of the filigree work and its stylistic configuration in the bracelet Java la Grande identify same maker or workshop, or is it the use of same stylistic references by more than one maker? Are the found objects, the mahogany wood, the key, the kangaroo in the bracelet Java la Grande, material evidence of a voyage of discovery to Australia in the 16th century? I think we can say that it does finally connect Portugal and Australian history. So, we've entered a darkness here. As we descend down an Alice in Wonderland rabbit hole and into the darkness, we are enveloped by the real and the unreal, and we just maybe are entering an Umberto Eco hyperreality. Humanity and making jewellery coincide. Human drama prevails, and contemporary jewellery continues to capture it. Sound and space is the beat. Rhythm is the wire and space. The wire is the line. Line measures space. Line captures space. Line is the metre of poetry. Line is the poetry of the matter. Space is the matter of poetry. Does poetry matter? Wire traps space. Wire calibrates space. Wire catches space. Wire gains space. Space is the absence of wire. Space is the absence of matter. Does absence matter? Does abstinence matter? Does matter matter? Matter, space and time. It's a matter of space. It's a matter of time. Rhythm is the division of space. Rhythm is the division of time. Rhythm is the timing of events. Rhythm claims the event. Intervals are in the first half and the last quarter. Second half is in the first interval. Second interval is in the first half. Clams, clam bakes and syncopation. Wire is the anticipation of the syncopation. Body rhythms, heartbeat, walking, breathing, crying. Don't cry for me, Argentina. Hemi, demi, semi-quavers. Paradiddles, flams and ratamucues. Crotchets, minims, rosemary and thyme. Repetition is the consolidation of space. Mind the gap. Stand clear of the closing doors, please. Repetition, variety, unity and harmony. What's for dinner? A repetition of repetitions. You can say that again, that again, that again, that again. Repetition, 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 repetition. Repetition, repetition brings new variations. Repetition brings new arrivals. Repetition is arrivals and departures. Same elements occur, but in different ways. Same elements reoccur, but in unexpected ways. Reoccurring, not discarded, once they are understood. Reoccurring, repeating, reappearance, duplication, echo. Hello, I hear an echo. If you've heard this story before, don't stop me because I'd like to hear it again. You can say that again. Frequency of the infrequent and the frequent. Permutations, mutations and amputations. Pattern announces space. Pattern declares geometry. Wire is the word. Anadiplosis, anadiplosis, epinodos, epiphora, epiphistrophy. Wire is the word. Germination, polyptyton, epinophora. Wire is the word. Anaphora, someplace. Wire is the word. Repetition is the consolidation of time. Flight time, landing time, departure time and arrival time. Measurable time, variable time, half time, waltz time. 6854, common time, cut time. Take 5 blue rondo a la Turk, time out, time further out. Who's on first? The first shall be last and the last shall be first. Summertime and the living is easy. Lunchtime, supper time. The 1206 and stopping at all stations. Continuous movement in a linear direction and stopping off for tangents. Repeat that again. Continuous movement in a linear direction and stopping off for tangents. Returning to the beginning, the entrance is at the exit. The commencing, the continuous, and the termination. Repositioning, changing the order, restating the fact. Series of pathways with intervals of stopping and starting. Periods of dwelling and moments of constant travel. Moments of dwelling and periods of constant travel. Durations of sustained constant rhythm, stopping at all stations. Possibilities of changing variables. 4:30 express from Clifton Hill. Intervals, avenues and egress. Introductions and conclusions and egress. Thin avenues, fat avenues and egress. Egress, 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 egress. You can say that again. That's only the introduction. We've entered another darkness. Endangered Pink and the Story of Philately. Hollywood glamour brought new jewellery boldness in the 1940s. Liberated from deprivations of wartime, designers of costume jewellery had the freedom to innovate with gold-plated base metals, silver gilt and paste gems, faking of what would be worth 100 times more. Oh, so it's been done before. Could these philals be fallacy and made to disbelieve and mislead, or just an erroneous delusion? In 2012, are these philately for the cognoscenti a misconception of confusion of an earlier jewellery history? Can these gauds be a fallacious testimony to what was an earlier treasure, or is it just another expression of jewellery art? In their new resurrection, can they now be considered fine art? Pink is whiter than red. It's not red and it's not white, maybe an arranged blending of the two, extremities of red and white. It's the sweet space in between. Is it bleeding? It's a sweet bleeding. A caged pink is captured tenderness, and still pink is slow to anger. Pink is calming, warm and comforting, a target for unconditional love. Tenderness and kindness can escape its edge. A fragile pink can lose its sting. Does pink have a lack of self-worth? It can indicate an overly cautious nature. Seepage of pink brings hope. Leakage brings resentment and panic. Pink is sweetness and innocence, though inexperience and naivety is easily trapped. Pink is warm and soft, while a piercing nail brings pain. Being in the pink abandons the responsibilities. Pink prompts childhood memories, though not always comforted by the mother. Does pink show a lack of willpower, maybe showing a lack of self-reliance? Pink accompanying dark colours intensifies strength and sophistication. Are you watching? The Rothschild red giraffe is an endangered species. In contemporary art jewellery, an original idea is quickly taken and reworked, and so the original becomes fresh meat for the jewellery consolidator. One sees one's remarks in print so shortly after. Contemporary jewellery is self-referential. There are principally three phases in contemporary art jewellery. First, there is the origin, authored by the originator, principally the original idea, the original work, though having the essential original primary idea is not fully defined and sits as pasture waiting to be consumed. Second is the consolidator, This quick brown fox jeweller, though not having that essential spark of originality, is a critical observer with a keen eye for new pasture and fresh meat to take up and exploit to serve their own personal development. Jeweller consolidators are very mobile, performing on stage and quick to internet publish their brilliant new revelations. The fresh meat has been consumed and the originator obscured. Jewellery plagiarism abounds. The third condition is the Kelvinator. That's in Australia, that's a refrigerator phase, in which the consolidator has made available for the jewellery procession to follow. Entropy prevails with decay of the idea breeding like spores. The many manifestations that follow offer some preservation without inspiration, and the plagiarism emits but remains mute. Beware, jewellery incest abounds. The Rothschild red giraffe is an endangered species, but the kangaroo is always there. They first met in the lost De Carrara bracelet and have had many playful and happy adventures together in the jewellery history, and they now live in the Newark Museum in New Jersey. Their affection has blossomed, and now the glamour of their lifestyle is intensely loving. Is the meeting of the Rothschild red giraffe with the red kangaroo a fable? Surely it's not freakish. Whimsical it may appear, and at times quite flirtatious. Though they remain vulnerable and may even be under attack, there is a rhapsody in the union. I think we've arrived at the finish. And I have this picture for your organisation. It's a jewellery statement, but it's also a manufacture making. But it's not such a good story. I found this in a 1937 National Geographic. Thank you very much, everyone.
I was curious about your researches at the Met when you were looking at some of the ancient Etruscan and Greco-Roman granulated pieces. Mm-hmm. Did you find that they, on some of the more complex ones, had perhaps done them in stages and then soldered them together, or would they have fused the whole thing at once?
Okay. First of all, there's no solder. It's all copper salt diffusion. Mm-hmm. There's principally three systems of heat joining. The first one is with solder. If you use that system, you can, when you reheat it to add more on, the previous solder joint can melt. It's unstable. But the other thing is solder fills gaps. This Bronze Age gold manufacture, which is the par excellence of goldsmiths' history, jewellery history, is so fine. It is so fine. The second one is about fusion, but fusion distorts the surface. The third one is copper salt diffusion. This is where copper diffuses into the surface and changes the metal temperature of the surface. The goldsmith, at his charcoal fire, holds it at a certain temperature, and this outer surface melts. Nothing is added on to this, so it's fine. It's the finest system. And that's how they were able to do these wondrous things. The only problem is, it's the finest, but it's the weaker. It's weak. It's not strong. So there has to be strategies of reinforcement in the manufacture. All the time there's strategy. And sometimes there's a stylistic configuration that strengthens it, keeps everything together. Things are supporting each other. You see it. You might think it's style. There's a stylistic configuration there, but it's sometimes out of technical factors. Now, what was your question?
I was wondering if they made things in pieces and then joined them.
Prefabrication in Bronze Age gold manufacture is very important. Things happen in the fire. Mm-hmm. And I gave you the little demonstration about charging the fire with the blowpipe and getting it up and having this piece ready, and you put it straight in, straight out again. If you do it slowly and the fire's not hot enough, all those little bits that you put together and have glued together with fish glue, ground fish bones, that's going to burn out and everything's going to roll off and it's a mess.
I know.
Okay. The other thing is, what's the other thing? Okay.
Yeah,
So if that
it gets
fire
too
is
hot.
charged and you have it in there too long, it'll just melt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that too.
So there's a prefabrication. There's a prefabrication and then things are put together. But by the fire using the heat joining system. But, it's not just, these are such complex things. It's not a matter of just starting to make something and then adding more on. It doesn't work like that.
Well, in my
Prefabrication is
experience,
important.
if you have if I do some fine bits and I want to join them together, I've got two heavier things with a heavier seam, so the things around it would melt that were put together first, like on the thinner, finer pieces.
Yeah. Well, with copper salt diffusion, it's very high temperature. This is so close to melting. If you go over a little bit, bang, you've lost it.
So then, do we
melts.
not know how they did it then? To join the heavier
I've
pieces?
just explained it. No, but you see, the thing is that these things are prefabricated. You paint the pieces with copper salt and you put them together. But you have to be mindful. Some parts have a lot of mass and they won't heat up as quickly as the parts with little mass. Some of those, a wire from this period, in the 3rd century BC, a little wire will melt in a candle flame. You have to be so close, but you have to understand the material. This is why you look at this work and there is a drama. There's a whole lot of decision making. There are the technical factors. Things happen in the fire, and it's very interesting to see how goldsmiths of that period dealt with the variation. Sometimes there was a little bit more copper salt, so it burnt a hole in the thing. So what did a goldsmith do? He made a little patch, and Johnson & Johnson weren't the first to make Band-Aids, I have to tell you that. And so they put a little gold patch over there, paint it with copper salt and refuse it, cover it over. But there are other goldsmiths who said, it's okay, it doesn't matter. And there is parts to strengthen it, because this is gold that's 96, 97, 98% gold, and maybe 2% silver, 1% copper or something like that. So it's very soft, it's very weak. And so the join is very fine. And so there has to be this reinforcement and strengthening. Sometimes they have a bit of excess wire off, and with the chisel they cut it off and put it in a part where there's a little bit of a gap. They should be connecting. So there's a whole lot of strategies of working within that domain.
Thank you.
You mentioned early on in your lecture that you could tell the difference between a left-handed goldsmith and a right-handed goldsmith. How do you tell that?
Well, there's some things that you shouldn't talk about, but now I've mentioned it. It's very clear. It's the closest one can get to the signage of authorship, who was the maker. Now, it's very clear. First, I'll go back a little bit. There's two systems of making wire in Bronze Age gold technology. There's a block-twisted wire. This is solid wire. Pour an ingot, long ingot, and then with hammers, hammer it and thin it out, and then twist it, and then roll it with a flat stone, and then put it back in the fire, soften it, and do the same again. Now, the other wire, which is the finest and the most delicate, is ribbon-twisted wire. Now, ribbon-twisted wire is where you beat the gold out to as thin, and if you think you've arrived, you haven't arrived, you've got to go further. This is thinner than a sheet of paper, the gold. This is the substrate. And so then with a chisel, they score it and peel off a little strip. Wrap the little strip around a needle. I'm not telling you anything that hasn't been published, I have to say. I'm not, okay. So you wind this around a needle, and then you've got a tube. It's got these helical creases. Now, if it's a right-handed goldsmith, the helical creases will go in a particular way. If the goldsmith is left-handed, the helical creases go another way. Most ancient gold is right-hand twisted. And so you look for where the helical crease goes from the lower right to the upper left. When you see this, you think it's okay, it's okay. The only problem is with this, in the 19th century they didn't know this. And so the 19th century copies, the fakes, they didn't know this, and they made wire that was drawn from a draw plate. A draw plate didn't exist until about the 6th century AD, okay? It's a whole different identity of wire. But wire with helical creases, it was first published in 1926 in the Journal of American Archaeology. And so that's about as... There are other idiosyncratic groups of jewellery that do identify the uniqueness of a maker. It's one group, a most important group is, this is in the British Museum, it's, they call it the group, the Master from Santa Eufemia. In this gold jewellery from Campania all have a little corkscrew type spiral in the wire. This doesn't exist anywhere else, it just is in this little group. And so they've labelled this as the Master of Santa Eufemia. So,
it seemed to me that you showed two instruments in your rethinking and reworking of ancient gold that perhaps the ancient goldsmiths didn't have. One was a piece of paper and the ability to make detailed drawings on paper of a high enough quality to show it, and the other was the spectacles that you were wearing as you were working on it.
Okay.
Do you have any thoughts about how they were able to overcome
well, there's
this?
two things there. Well, the paper was, as I said, was used as a map. It was after doing the SEM and the imaging and drawing places, and places I wanted to see. Well, I think it's quite legitimate to draw. Is it supposed to be on some papyrus or? I know, yeah. But anyway, but the but your other point about the manufacture and looking, being able to see the thing, I think it's pretty clear. Ancient goldsmiths were really of a slave caste, and but there were obviously goldsmiths who had very good eyesight, and their families maybe would have got a few more little privileges and things, and that would be passed on, that knowledge passed on. And so these were people that were maybe a little bit myopic, that they had very good sight and they could see detail. Some diamond jewellers work like this, but when they're young, one has much better eyesight than when I did these. I'm not going to tell you how old I was, man, but I was in between 55 and something or other. And so I'd lost it with my eyesight. I had to wear glasses, man, come on. But you can't feel it in the fire, you burn your fingers and burns your hair if you get too close to the fire too, I've found. And it does change the colour of your hair. But historians over period, they've written some funny stuff about how the ancient goldsmiths saw these things. But I think, first of all, that these people were not old, and they had very good vision, and this was passed down through the family. I think that's a good argument. You see, there's others that said they must have looked through a globule of water. This is some of this 19th century stuff. And it's madness, But the other one was that when the Schliemans excavated the Priam treasure, the treasures of Troy, they found a whole lot of little quartz domes I don't know how many there were, maybe 30 or 40 or something. They said, "Oh, we found it. We found the prisms. We found the magnifiers." But these were buttons. So, yeah, I'm sure. But I think it's pretty clear that these Bronze Age gold pieces are made by the one person. There's not composite pieces where there's normally left-handed and right-handed work on one piece. So, but there could be, a child could be, you see, with beaded wire, you see, I told you about block twisted wire, that's one type. The second type is ribbon twisted wire. Now, from ribbon twisted wire, this is quite amazing, that little ribbon that they made with a helical twist, and then they anneal it, and then they, between two flat blocks, squash it, roll it, push it, squash it, and it reduces down, it compresses. The funny thing is, if you look at this in an SEM, you can still see a little hole, and yet this wire is the thickness of a hair. Now, how is that? You know? But, why am I telling you this? Beaded wire, of course. You see, ribbon twisted wire, they then used to make beaded wire. This looks like a little row of balls. And it's a little tool that Theophilus Presbyter talks about, the beading file, he calls it. It's two grooves. And so the goldsmith, I said to you, the wire gets down, it's smaller than the diameter of a hair, human hair. And so the goldsmith with this beading file rubs it backwards and forwards, and it forms into a bead. And then he has to find that next groove to do the next one. And so it's one bead after another from that little wire. Now the thing is, I found to do this, the best methodology is you can't see it, but you can feel it. You can feel it with the tool, with your fingers. You can feel it, and you do the beading back and forward, but not too much, otherwise the wire breaks because it's so fine. And then you take the tool away, you can feel it, and then you find the edge of the beading file in the last groove. And so you start moving it backwards and forwards and then slowly ease it over to make the next groove. And so it's the feeling, it's the fingers that do the seeing.
Yes, thank you so much. Robert, I just want to thank you so much on behalf of us all here this evening and the General Society. It really has been an honour to have you here, to hear about your unique work, your fascinating mythology, and really to see an overview of your work in such an original way. It was fantastic, so thank you very, very much.
And Robert, not to mention, completely entertaining. It was the first lecture that I actually sat out and thought it could be some kind of musical score to the beat of the lecture. So we'll get working on that. And thank you for coming to the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen. We are so honored and grateful. And on behalf of the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York, founded 1785, we express our gratitude to Robert Baines, art jeweler and goldsmith, for his lecture, The Historic Goldsmith, Informing the Contemporary, for your participation in the General Society Artisan Lecture Series. Thank you. And when you come to town, we want you to feel that you have another home at the General Society of Mechanics and Trades, and so we're making you an honorary library member for life.
That's great. Thank you very much.
I also want to mention that you will find some of Robert's books for sale at the back of the room. And if you want to find even more about the elusive Java la Grande, you will be able to find it in this fabulous book. And this is just one of his other books. I mean, what a brilliant title this is. The Copybook of Copies, Fabulous Follies, Frauds and Fakes by Robert Baines. So these are available. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning of the evening, we're so grateful to Gallery Loupe, who have bought some of Robert's work from his ongoing exhibit. And for those of you who may be in Montclair, I do warmly suggest that you visit his exhibit. Again, I want, on behalf of all of the General Society, I just want to thank Robert for really a fabulous, fabulous lecture, and we're really so honored that you could spend some of your brief time in America with us. So thank you very much. I want to, yes?